Hey there, rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you this week's feature match between David Curris on his post-ban list Solaria versus myself on a Sherry Bahamut Baha Blast style list. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our Q2 2024 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session.
So as we get into it here, I just want to give a big thanks to Neeb Valungan over on the Discords for shipping me his take on this Baha Blast style list. We then tweaked it to what you see today. It is very fun. It makes use of Bahamut's searchability and Parrot Dragon to put some pretty explosive pressure out very quickly. And David Curris is just playing an updated Solaria post-ban list, so we'll have to see how it goes. Being able to start with the right Solaria, especially with Solaria Darkness, could be really helpful here, but we'll see exactly what's going on. I am going to be on the coin, which is pretty helpful. Just sets us up for being able to get pretty aggressive and have some defensive options with the coin, whereas Solaria might not have as much time to start up because it doesn't have access to RFGing a bunch of stuff. Sure, it will have two rulers, but it won't have any way to be able to play. It'll have to tap out essentially to be able to really kind of go off on turn 2, which sets us up to be able to respond to it. So we'll have to see how this goes and kind of what we get to start with here. Beginning of game triggers from Solaria, we'll see what comes out. Waiting to see exactly what maybe the mulligan is here, setting up for, you see those first two stones being Pure Heart Stone and Mylist, just set up the first two stones being Sherry getting us the first one, and then Pure Heart sets us the Mylist up, so it just is kind of meant to speed up things a little bit here. We do see Solaria's Fire come down. It's not going to help particularly too much here because we're not really playing Burn. We see a Darkness Station come out. That's probably going to be what calls us Stone. I imagine we see another Solaria's come down here. We see an Excavation of the Legacy, so we know that's live. When Solaria's Light comes down here, we do see Solaria's Darkness come down. So these are the chaseable ones. Getting our first stone, getting that, paying 100 for a... we do see, in response to the trigger to be able to stack the Mylist, we are going to see Solaria's Darkness and Solaria's Fire get activated, which is fine for us. We're going to play Fountain of Trials. This is really helpful because it lets us be able to recover and search multiple times a turn with Bahamut. So we're going to try to search here after draw but before recovery, getting ourselves a Parrot Dragon, recover Bahamut, get ourselves a second Parrot Dragon off of the search because it is a dragon, and so when it gets added to our hand without being drawn, we can just cheat it into play. This is really helpful for us. We're trying to set up, again, that pressure here. We still have access to coin. We do see a sort of prog come down here, which is totally fine. New dragon is new Solaria Station is going to get to come in here. Solaria Station of Light, that's going to call stone again. I imagine we might have another Solaria's potentially, but no, another Wind Solaria site comes down here, hitting another Excavation, and this hand is not great for David. Those two Solaria sites will not help him be able to cast anything in that hand, or anything that he has RFG'd right now, so kind of a free turn for Baha. He does have access to Solaria's Darkness. A little bit of a misplay there. Could have, before recovery, done Solaria's Darkness to prevent searching for the turn. Instead, we're going to get to kind of outplay it a little bit. We try to go for the search post-recovery. We're going to respond by using try Fountain to recover the Baha and search again before the cannot search resolves, because it is chaseable, which is really helpful. So now we have 3 Parrot Dragons and 3 Will. So our 3 cost and above dragons are now free, or are now discarded by 3, which means if they cost 3, they're free, like this Vega and Electra, which gets to come into play. Sitting at a 9/9, it's pretty nice. Who needs to worry about having Vega or Electra when we have 3 Parrot Dragons? We only get to put in dragons for the rest of the turn, keep that in mind, including a second Vega and Electra, which is really nice, and we also have an Ultra Dragon Shooting Star. So 3 very large bodies coming down here very quickly. We get to use Conclave. We're going to try to use this to see if we can draw into some more 3-cost dragons, which would be really nice, but instead we just get to use coin to be able to use the ability to get Longsword. So even though those Parrot Dragons get their attacks reduced, they have swiftness and plus 200, so what you see on board here is exactly 4,000 damage. It is 12 plus 11 plus 11, which takes us to 34, and then 2, 4, and 6, and so just like that, on our turn 2, thanks to coin and Fountain of Trials, we have killed the Solaria player. So pretty aggressive strat here. We just kind of played in. We could have certainly walked into something like another sort of progression, but ultimately David just did not have anything in hand to be able to back him up. All of that stuff was uncastable, so we'll go into game 2. Game 2 here, obviously hoping to start with another Solaria's Darkness if it can, because that is a very helpful card in this matchup to be able to stop the searches. Do see the Solaria's Darkness come down here. We're going to try to set up the Fountain of Trials again. We're going first, so we're just saying, hey, we're trying to get in here. Solaria Station of Darkness, we do have a sort of progression. We also have several other of the additions. Red Solaris site here hits us a access to the excavation, which we're not really going to be able to use right now. There's a Muse staring at in hand. Nothing much in this hand right now is castable for 1. We're going to go ahead and pay 1, make 1 void for the banish, forcing a banish here. And this is a little bit of a mistake on my end. So knowing that this is here, we do see the coin come out here, gets to RFG another card, which does set us up for being able to do the other addition. Ultimately, we're stopping making us so we can't search. This is a little bit of a mistake on our end. So we let it happen, and then we go to our turn, and we try to recover and search during our turn, so we're free. This is a mistake here. The interference forces us to banish a thing, so we shouldn't actually be concerned if a Paradragon gets banished here, because it then gets to be reanimated. Like at the end of the turn, it'll come back. So instead, we kind of play this passive game here and just search for a Vega and Electra to set up for future turns and then move to recovery. This is incorrect. It sets us up for being able to next turn, you know, be able to like flash in a Rogue Spectator to get a body. That lets us be able to banish something. And then we can then start going off and searching from there to try to set up for the lethal the next turn. We do see access to the 2, we have access to Excavation now, which is pretty good. Can be able to flip the Red Dragon. The Red Dragon doesn't help too much, especially if we go in for a pretty aggressive line, and then we can Replicant Shiva, which is something we certainly could do with this deck. We do see a tuck back to get another addition. If we do go in for dragons, though, we can't go in for Replicant Shiva, so that's also something to keep in mind. We see a Binding of the Light Solaris Sire, and we're going to go straight into an Excavation of a Legacy. Unfortunately, nothing in our hand is going to be able to stop that, so we're just going to have to take it. We're going to probably have the entire deck RFG'd. Just hitting a Lorite. Calling Lorite, there's no Lorites in the deck, so it just RFG's everything. Then we're going to tuck back 5 cards. Including putting a Electra's Training on the top, so that next turn we can just kind of immediately set us up for being able to go in. This does mean, though, that if we use the Solaria's Darkness, we're in a bit of a rough shape for being able to get the Electra's Training back to hand, so that's just something to keep in mind here. We're going to see a Judgment of Fire Dragon. You see Electra's Training is there on top. Dragon is getting judgmented here. Ultimately, we don't mind this, so it should actually be letting the avatar flip, and then we're going to try to go into the search, because if we try to do Solaria's Darkness in response, then we get to if we try to do Solaria's Darkness in response, then we lose the Electra's Training, and that sets us up for being pretty safe, another free face safe turn. We don't see a Solaria's Darkness get activated here. This is, again, another bit of a misplay from my perspective. So we're going to go ahead and grab the Ultra Dragon Shooting Scar. We're just trying to load up on dragons here. Still at the end of turn, we're going to go ahead and do Kilo Fossil Girl in the City to try to pop the Solaria's Darkness, just to say, like, hey, I don't want to have to deal with that. Ultimately, that's also a bit of a mistake. We should have popped one of the other additions, because we know that the Electra's Training is on top. So we just didn't manage the additions well in this game. We tried to kind of see, like, are you going to try to RFG to make myself search? But honestly, we want him to try to stop us from searching because we have Trials up. So it's actually better for us to just pop the Force Banish so that we could cast in, or even better, we could force him to do the the light tap down, so then we could do this Rogue Spectator, be set up to be able to banish something, and then we can just kind of go in this turn pretty aggressively and potentially even kill, which would be really nice. Instead, we're going to walk into some pretty big misplays here. A main phase Girl Staring At. Don't know why I'm casting this card here. It does not provide me any value whatsoever. There is no follow-up play after this. It does not set us up well for being able to do anything. Ultimately, that would have been better served to play during David's turn. Do Girl Staring At, make it so that nothing is going to really get any value there, and then we would be pretty safe. Just kind of stumbling here, and in very traditional Jeremy's trying to play a red deck fashion, just not playing this very well. The Girl Staring At would be much better during David's turn. That being said, the Girl Staring At would be something we want to resolve after after the Electrus training resolves, to try to give swiftness to everything, because then the timestamps will be it gains swiftness from Electrus training, and then it loses it from Girl Staring At. So then we're, again, safe for a turn. That leaves David with only one will. We can kind of reestablish. They don't have any enter effects. So even if we kind of do start judgmenting a lot of these dragons, they're not going to do anything, which sets us up really nicely. And you see there is that Muse in hand, which the Muse would be unplayable, and the rest of the hand would be not great. Now, that being said, if David does have Sword of Progression in hand here, but has not cast a previous Sword of Progression yet, so it wouldn't be able to cancel us anyway, and you can see the rest of the hand is like 2 drops or higher. I'm sure it would be able to get the Fire Edition out, but that really isn't helping too much here, especially because Vegan Electro would be very huge, and as you can see, we have a handful of stuff, so we're probably going to try to pop something like... probably going to try to pop the Fire Edition before it gets any real value off of it anyway, from like the Parrot Dragons going in. So we're probably going to see a Judgment here. Putting back for Light Dragon. Ultimately, we do see Lantern of the Fire Solaria Sire, RFGing another Lantern. Just kind of checking what cards are left there. We do have access to that Electrus training. This is what I mean by... just kind of misplayed there. There was a very real chance that I could close this game out if I didn't just randomly throw out the Girl Staring At. I just did bad math on what I could search for, and didn't try to just push when I could have. Ultimately, that was the mistake of the play. If I'd had one more will, the line would have made sense, because then I could play another Trials and do 3 Parrot Dragons all in one go, play all the dragons in my hand and get Longsword, and that would have been fine. That would have played through everything that David had on field. It would have negated the additions, and it would have been lethal just like it was before. But ultimately, that's a mistake on my part for not counting how much will I have. If I was on the coin, that would have been lethal, but it's a little bit of a mistake. So take the damage, and we see a pass turn from David. From there, we see attempting to pop the Lantern, which is going to then burn the Rogue Spectator, which is fine. Still successfully pop it. Going to try to draw for turn. Here we're going to try to go in for some searches before recovery to get some Parrot Dragons out. We'll be playing into some will because we didn't see David, do the Judgment effects here. So we're like, okay, maybe we just have something that I'm not really worried about. Gonna try to use light here to tap down the Trials. We don't mind. We're just gonna still try to get a second search out. This is still gonna get us into 2 Parrot Dragons, which could get us into a 3rd Parrot Dragon post recovery, so we get free stuff, which is nice. So we're like, okay, this feels good. We can try to go in for our lethal lines here. Something feels odd here about what David's got. Maybe he's got like double Sword of Progression or something. Like, we know one of the cards is Electrus training, so we know one of the cards in hand. We're feeling pretty confident. Maybe David misplayed or something. We'll play into it. We're going to search post recovery for 3rd Parrot Dragon, and then we'll try to play all these free dragons that we have in our hand, which feels great. We go in for the first one. That's a Vegan Electra, and David's like, sure. In response, there's the girl's Muse Staring At, and that locks the whole turn out. We're not going to waste paying the full 3 will for the Vegan Electra to do anything. We're not going to play the dragon. You notice in a second here, that I will attempt to play a full cost Replicant Shiva. I'm not even legally allowed to play that because of Parrot Dragon's restrictions. And so doesn't really matter because nothing in the hand here is going to be able to stop David from next turn just being able to. There's no cancels in the deck. I mean, it's playing Fossil Girl and some Lowrites, I think. But beyond that, it's not going to be able to stop all of these dragons from just going in and cleaning my face with only 2,200 life left on board. So we play the Replicant Shiva. It's going to try to pop the dragon, and David will lose some life from the thing, from the thing. I let it. He lets it kill the dragon because I paid full cost for it instead of Solarising it. But again, I shouldn't be able to cast this card. I can't play non-dragon, non-bird resonators, so that's fine. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because he's already done 2,100, and I'm tapping out here for some reason to play another Fountain of Trials. But we just passed the turn. There's going to be 3 dragons available and an Electrous Training on a fully tapped out board, and so that will just be. It's just a matter of walking through the paces here. Very well played from David, kind of baiting out the line with the Muse staring at, which is unfortunate that I missed out on the opportunity to push in through lethal just because I foolishly used the girl staring at too aggressively, and also didn't pop the right edition. If I had popped if I hadn't popped, if I let the Solaria's Darkness Edition resolve there and instead go to try to pop the probably the Banish Edition, we would have been just fine. Going into game 3, we certainly wouldn't have had to deal with the Electrous Training. Going into game 3, back on coin, hoping for another very aggressive start here. We'll see what we get out of it, if we can play into it. Ultimately not seeing Trials there, I think, in the main board, or in the main hand, which is really rough. Does stop the deck from being able to get really aggressive, setting up our 2 first stones. We see Solaria's Light at the beginning of the game trigger, so stuff that goes to graveyard gets RFG'd instead. Get our first dragon, go for Fire Dragon, makes sense. Hitting our first stone, Fire Stone. Electrous Training gets RFG'd. Does have an Excavation in hand. We're gonna get our first stone, and then we're gonna pay 100. And for some reason, against this matchup, choosing to play Flare of the Dragon King. This doesn't really help us at all. It doesn't also really do much for us. The hand is pretty dead, but it could have been another card to be able to use for Chivalry Steers. This is pretty neat because our Mind List is second stone. The problem is it needs non-dragons to enter, and the big J-Rulers on David's side are all dragons. So Realm of the Dragon Emperor, if I'm flipped, we'll get to burn everything that's a non-dragon for 800, but if it's not flipped, it burns everything that enters for 500 if it's not a dragon. So doesn't really help me too much against David's build because he's mainly just throwing J-Rulers at me, and they all do happen to be dragons. So David choosing to go in here does have access to Girl Staring At, does have access to Excavation, could choose to go in right now, ultimately choosing to pass, which I think is correct, especially seeing that there is the Girl Staring At here. We're going to try to go in before recovery, get our first Parrot Dragon, seeing if we can set that up. David says that is fine, you can have it, does not get burned. Move to recovery, Calling Stone, could go get a second Parrot Dragon, don't have much in the way of attack things to be able to get aggressive with here. Gonna go ahead and just hard cast another Parrot Dragon from hand. If we could search for a third Parrot Dragon, we'd be in good shape. We could, but like we don't want to because we just don't have good dragons in hand to be able to go for it. We're gonna wait to see if we can bait out some stuff at the end of David's turn to try to make it happen. We see 2 Binding of the Light Solaris Sires come down here thanks to Solarization, which will certainly help to be able to stop the aggressive lines. And you see we do have that Excavation in hand as long as the Girl Staring At, as well as a Sword of Progression. So I'm curious to see if we see Sword of Progression cast here, and nope, we're just going straight for the Excavation, saying we are going to go in and flip some J-Rulers this turn. So that's going to get RFG'd the whole deck, because then we're going to go into being able to judgment all these dragons very quickly, starting with Light Dragon, which is pretty good to be able to wipe this board, especially since we have a Solaria's Light here, so it all just goes to graveyard instead, so there's no way to like try to buy it back or anything else like that. Seeing the hand is pretty small here. The addition generator, we get our third stone. Gonna probably Judgment Light Dragon here. Having only cast having cast 0 Sword of Progressions, right now the Sword of Progress is just draw a card, which until we put cards back on top of deck to attempt to perform Judgment doesn't really help us very much. Although it does set us up to be able to say, like, we can stack to what our next draw is, so we always have the right answer to be able to deal with whatever I'm doing. It's one of the crazy things about Solaria. So in response to the Judgment, we're not going to do anything. In response to the own effect holding priority, try to do Solaria's Light. We're going to flash in Raymond. Raymond's going to try to give our whole board Eternal and +2/+2 to try to protect it through whatever is coming down here and give us a couple nice things to be able to banish. Unfortunately, if we do flip Darkness Dragon, we're in bad shape because we still have to banish 2 things. But David's like, nah, in response to God Art, we're going to go ahead and do, or after God Art resolves, after the enter effect resolves, but still before my thing, we're going to do Girl Staring At. So we're also going to remove all of the Eternal. So that just wipes the whole board. Once again, those 2 cost chance David playing really well to play out to stopping my deck from being able to protect itself and set up the combos and just really kind of push things down. We do see that there's probably an Electra's Training on the top of the deck, there's going to be an Electra's Training probably close to the top of the deck after a flip, but even dealing with this Light Dragon, we're in bad shape, knowing that we're probably going to get slammed down next turn. I think there's also a world for David, knowing what this deck can do, where you just Judgment all 3 dragons this turn, so you don't even have to worry about Electra's Training, and just set up the lethal, especially with 2 bindings. Just like, flip all the dragons, don't care about Electra's Training, force me to have the outs to try to play through any kind of aggressive lines and say that's fine. So searching after recovery, gonna try to at least get a vegan Electra out here, to get some searching power. Hitting another thing, we could go into a Replicant Shiva here, ultimately choosing to pass because we know Replicant Shiva is just not going to be very helpful right now. We do see a move to recovery. Free Dragon comes in, Water Dragon. Calling Stone. Now we're at 4 stones, RFing the top card. We have Guardian of Wind, Solaris Sire. We have access to no Electra's Training this turn in hand. Sword of Progress to try to draw another card. Draws us into our last card. We haven't tucked, but this will let us tuck a Electra's Training on the top of our deck for next turn, which is something that's important to note because we can flip this Fire Dragon over and put ourselves in a pretty good spot. You see the cards in hand here. Not much in the way of responsiveness. Does have access to being able to produce some tokens. Doesn't super help. So the ethereal tokens don't really help too much because we're not trying to find lethal. And next turn, we're just going to kill with all the dragons anyway because we're trying to stack Electra's Training back on top of the deck. Just to be safe, it does appear we're going to stack 2 Electra's Training back on top and then just put an assortment of other cards back on top of the deck as well to be able to Judgment Fire Dragon. Here, this sets us up so that next turn we're guaranteed to get Electra's Training unless I can force production of will somehow from David, which is unlikely, and I don't have any additional ways in the deck to be able to produce will, just to recover Bahamut. So paying 1, we're going to see a tuck back, and this is honestly, again, David playing really well into this matchup. Niklaus's Corollas is an incredible card to play in this response, knowing that I'm a Resonator combo-based deck that needs things to stick on board. This Niklaus's Corollas says, cool, I may only have 2 will, I have 5 species of spot removal, and you need multiple things to stick, and you only have so much will. This was really cool to play those 5 additions. It's going to make playing into this very difficult. Not impossible, but pretty dang near if we can try to do something about it. And then next turn I'm just like dead to the Electra's Training with the 4 J Rulers dragons anyway. So Niklaus's Corollas kind of cinches it, but we're still gonna, for the sake of at least seeing if we can play to the out, maybe we can draw into a Girl Staring At. That would be really huge. If we can get a Girl Staring At here before recovery, we would be in a really good spot. So there's a world where we draw, and we could try to use Daji here, like if we're trying to dig, right? The world is like use Daji to try to draw into a girl staring at, or at the very least that will burn a Niklaus's Corollas, which bounces back to hand. Then we can cast the Daji again, set that up. It won't be able to be usable again, but we could at least maybe try to hold the fort a little bit. Instead, we're just going to go ahead and search for a Parrot Dragon before recovery, not playing to the girl staring at defensive out, because we need to be able to turn stuff off. If we could turn stuff off on David's side of the board, we'd actually be in pretty good shape. His hand is not great in terms of outside of these Niklaus's Corollas. He does not have much. So we'd have to kind of see if we could bait out or try to draw into the out, which would be really nice. So we're going to go ahead and swing in for 4, since that's fine. We're going to try to do Judgment of Bahamut, and in response, hold priority to search for another Parrot Dragon. Parrot Dragon comes into play, or attempts to get cheated in. This is still before Bahamut has flipped. In response to the attempt to cheat in, we're going to use Parrot Dragon to use any Niklaus's Corollas to put a Parrot Dragon back in our hands. In response, we're going to try to use Daji, targeting the Parrot Dragon that has been killed, to try to draw 2 and put 1 back. To destroy it, and then draw 2 and put 1 back. Instead, apparently we're not. We're going back. Going backwards here. So we burned 2 Parrot Dragons are gone. We're going to try to, they're both back in hand. Bahamut has to try to burn the Daji for 400, which in response we're going to try to sack her. And then draw 2 cards. Seeing if we can maybe bait out a 3rd. Ultimately, no. We get to draw 2 and discard 1. We don't need the Flare of the Dragon King. That's not... we have 2 Parrot Dragons in hand. Well, it looks like we maybe just we waited to bounce. We're just like letting me resolve Parrot Dragons, which is what we're trying to do here, right? The hope is to try to resolve Parrot Dragons. In response to the cast of the first Parrot Dragon, we use the Niklaus's Corollas to put the other Parrot Dragon back in our hand. We are going to attempt to respond to that. So you can see here, like, I do have some things that I can do to try to play through all of these bounces, but it is a hurdle to play through 5 of them, which is why, again, David is doing a really good job here of playing to the out of the Parrot, of the Niklaus's Corollas, and why that card is still very good, and why I play it in my Solaria's builds, because it's just 5 free spot removals, and sometimes you pair into a matchup that needs it, and I go, you know what, I'm thinking about probably conceding here, but let's see if I can play it out. Maybe there's a world where I can do it because I have the coin wheel. We're going to try to use Chivalry's Tears, targeting the Parrot Dragon in response to the Niklaus's Corollas bounce. We burn another Niklaus's Corollas there. We're going to burn another Chivalry's Tears in response. We've burned the last Niklaus's Corollas. And so we're realizing I put the wrong cards here. We're trying to realize exactly what Chivalry's Tears is trying to do here, realizing I burned the wrong card. Also moving these cards to graveyard because, like, I know that when this all resolves, it doesn't work. So he lets the second Chivalry's Tears resolves, which then procs to let it be. I banish it to Bahamut, which then uses the Chivalry's Tears to let me then reanimate it. And then at that point in time, he goes ahead and puts it back in my hand. And we go, wait a minute, actually, in response, it doesn't actually have an enter effect, so technically I have priority here, which is a little bit of a misplay on our part. So technically, when it reanimates, there's no enter effect at that point in time. I have priority, so I actually should have a window where I only have to pay 1 for a dragon. Instead, we're going to go ahead and say, you know what, we'll pay 2 and play Wyvern of Mount Olga, just to play another card. And we'll try to burn the Parrot Dragon for 1, to then try to get a 3-drop dragon out of the deck. I have a couple of flyers. It doesn't really matter, though, because Water Dragon will put all of them back in my hand. We're going to see a card tucked back at the bottom to try to do the full cast of Protuberance Solarized Whip, which draws 2 and RFGs 1, or discards 1. Both of those trainings are now right in hand. We get to go get a 1-drop dragon or 3-drop dragon, which we get to grab the wonderful almighty vegan Electra, which doesn't do anything for us here, recognizing that there's just absolutely no out because of Water Dragon being able to just bounce every blocker I have, and then knowing that there's an Electra's training in hand. It just truly doesn't do anything. So for the fun, we're just going to go ahead and tap out, get our longsword, and recognize that we lose. And then that's the end of it. Paying 100. Which is why I'm saying, honestly, there's actually a world where we could have even played through all of that and still won, because I had a priority sequence, but I would have been out of will. So unfortunately, that is the match. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Deck profiles will be up later this week. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.